So once an employer has put in place an outsourced scheme, whether it's GPP or Master Trust, they can't just set and forget. So how can they interact with the governance committee, the provider, the consultants, to make sure they're getting the best from whichever scheme they've chosen?
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you that it's not a set and forget. And I often say to companies, in no other part of your business would you put thousands, if not millions of pounds in a year into something that you didn't look at on an ongoing basis. So we would always encourage companies to have some form of ongoing governance. A lot of the clients we work with have formal governance committees. Now, even though you outsource your pension arrangement, there are things that you can be doing as a governance committee. I mean, I was at a governance committee meeting this morning where we were talking about auto-enrolment and the changes to the private members bill. What does that mean for that particular workforce? The other thing about outsourcing the pension arrangement is that nobody's really dealing with the benefit adequacy piece. So, when you have trustees, they'll often look at what member outcomes will be. The providers and Master Trust trustees will be concentrating on the operation of the Master Trust or GPP itself, rather than necessarily looking what each individual employer is going to achieve with their own contribution structure. So that's another important thing. On communications, for example, how is the provider and the employer how are they dovetailing communications between them? So for, say, something like International Women's Day, is the company doing something for that we can build on in relation to the pension fund? So there's lots of things. And a regular review of things like fees and services. Because I think a lot of the smaller employers that have moved across to Master Trusts simply aren't looking at their arrangements on an ongoing basis as well. And to be fair, the providers don't really have a lot of incentive to come to them and say, here's some additional services. Whereas the larger schemes that are advised by companies like ourselves are consistently pushing for more in terms of investments, in terms of communication and so forth. So it is important to be getting the two working really closely together.
So if I can pick up on that point that you talk about governance committees, and you said that many of the clients you work with do have governance committees. When I speak to many REBA members, some of them do, and they've come from that pensions background, but some of them don't, and they've landed at an employer where they're now in charge of the pension, and they go, there is no governance committee, and they've got a contract-based DC scheme. Should they be looking to put something in place, and how would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As I say, we would always recommend some form of ongoing governance. Now, it may be that particular person could do that themselves, working, say, with an external advisor. We generally say to people that it's good to have an external advisor. I would say that, but we know the market, so we know not only what you're getting from your existing provider, but what the rest of the market operates. But certainly, we fundamentally believe that there are benefits for companies having governance committees. We help companies set up things like terms of reference. There'll be some things they do cover and some things they don't. But even just keeping an eye on the provider maybe once a year, looking at are the investments delivering, etc. And I think it's healthy to be doing that.
There's going to be increasing emphasis on value for money within pensions generally. What are the things that you think those employers that use GPPs and Master Trusts or the contract-based DC schemes are going to see? What's going to perhaps be different?
Okay, I mean, I think that falls into a number of different areas. I think the first is investment strategy. What we've seen up until now with a lot of the providers is quite plain vanilla, sort of off-the-shelf default strategies. We're now starting to see that cost to value shift and a greater focus on member outcomes. We've obviously had the Mansion House speech, looking at illiquid assets and can they add value. So I think that's the first area that we're probably going to move towards more sophisticated investment strategies. I think the next area is retirement, or the support in the run-up to retirement. So you've got a lot of members now starting to come up to retirement purely with DC benefits. And particularly within GPPs, when people get to the point of retirement, they're kind of on their own a little bit. They've got investment pathways, but I think there will be more support coming there. And obviously there's a consultation out about what trustees, or there will be a consultation rather out about what the trustees are going to have to do in that space as well. So I think that's another one. I think the final one for me is looking at the gender pensions gap, and not just the gender pensions gap, but looking at things like ethnicity and other areas. And I was in a meeting with a provider this morning who said they can now provide helplines to people in 26 different languages, which I thought was fantastic. And that's, we've obviously got the gender pensions gap. That's been the one that's been well publicised. But there are other areas as well that we need to be addressing. So that'll be another area of challenge going forward.